Masculinity thrives when we think about logic, order, effectiveness, linear thinking, straightforwardness, merit-based, all of these things that get the job done. It's just show up, get the job done. That to me is a very masculine approach to something. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shack, and today I want to talk about masculinity. And by no means am I ever going to project or share what I think masculinity is in this very dogmatic way for anyone. I'm actually really curious to hear what your relationship is with your masculinity as you continue to grow and think and live. What I just want to do today is really talk about how it feels for me and what I interpret it as on my end of things, so that maybe it gives you some sort of insight and provide some sort of contrast with femininity and what these principles actually look like in a day-to-day real world life experience, right? Because they're so big and they're so important. And I realize most people have no idea what they are. They really don't know what they are. They really think that masculinity, the principle, is equals men, and femininity, the principle, equals women. And especially nowadays, that is just not true. That is not how it's looking right now. And I realized this when I was watching some reaction videos from Zuckerberg being on Rogan this week. So a couple of reaction videos, and it was something like, oh, Zuck wants, straight white men back in the corporate workplace and all the women out, and just crazy things like that, right? And I listened to that and I thought to myself, this is insane. Let me go and watch this whole video. So to do my due diligence, because that is what I believe in. I believe in thoughtful, detailed takes of things. I went and I watched the whole video from the whole interview from start to finish because I had to understand all of the context. And very clearly, I realized that most people that make reaction videos do not watch the full thing they're reacting to. So they have zero context, zero thoroughness, zero thoughtfulness. And that's unfortunate. But I watched everything, and he was talking about how much he loves MMA. That's what he was talking about. And whether you love him or you hate him, doesn't matter. He's been into MMA the last couple of years. And what he realized is it turned online for him something that he has been missing his whole life. He had been missing this feeling of primal aggression, this masculinity, this real important feeling that, if you had to, you could kill somebody if they were going to kill you or kill the people that you loved. Foundational interpretation of martial arts in general. And so he's talking about how martial arts is it's a masculine endeavor. You win in martial arts through masculine principles. That is just how it is, right? And he realized and how much that gave him, right? He started talking about how his wife is so grateful that he's doing jiu-jitsu, that he's doing MMA. I think it was, I don't even know which one, MMA, I guess, and or jiu-jitsu. And so how grateful, because he's more calm, he's more present, he's more thoughtful. And lo and behold, he realized that half the stuff that he was doing was complete nonsense, right? That's what he meant when he said that the corporate culture has been neutered and there is no more masculinity there. And so we need more masculinity within the corporate culture. And so he started talking about how there's an imbalance right now. And specifically, he was talking about how you want both, right? Especially now, we want to make corporate culture a space where everyone is welcome, not where femininity is the only thing that matters and masculinity is bad, right? And he's saying that's how it's been. And so that's what he's saying that needs to be fixed. Like, we need to embrace more masculinity within the culture. Beautiful, right? Absolutely beautiful. Masculinity thrives when we think about logic, order, effectiveness, linear thinking, straightforwardness, merit-based, all of these things that get the job done, right? It's just show up, get the job done. That to me is a very masculine approach to something, right? And there are times for feminine approach to things, right? Let's think about the bigger picture. Let's think about why this matters. Is everyone feeling connected? Is everyone having, um, is everyone doing okay? These are important things as well. But what's interesting is that you can't have those feminine principles at play within an organization if you don't first have the masculine principles set. That's why things are falling apart. That's why everything's getting so crazy and so overwhelmingly frustrating for so many people. They don't know what's left, what's right, what's wrong because we're missing masculinity. Masculinity sets order, it mans the perimeter of things, it makes sure that everyone on the inside is safe and nothing that's unsafe gets in, right? It's incredibly powerful and beautiful. And it's just so unfortunate how people don't understand what masculinity and femininity are, right? These foundational principles. So, just to share a story, about it was like last year, I hosted a workshop here in Dallas Fort Worth, Metroplex. It was about 20 people. And at a certain point of the workshop, and this was all about understanding men and women, and at a certain point in the workshop, I had the masculine folks get together, the people who feel that they are majority masculine minded, right? Their psyche is majority masculine in that they feel most themselves and most useful and most alive and most at peace when they are operating in their masculine, right? And then on the feminine side, it's when people feel most at peace, most useful, most thoughtful, most themselves when they're operating in their feminine. Now, we can unpack this a million different ways. I don't think most people even understand how to get to the bottom of that at this point in society, right? Women, we've been so cut off from our feminine nature. We've been so cut off from our intuition and our truth and our camaraderie as women, right? To find that strength within each other and to remind each other what really matters in this life. And men absolutely have been so cut off from that masculine, aggressive, go-getter kind of spirit because they've been made to feel like it's wrong. It is not wrong. It is so right. It is so right. But I digress. So I had them separate. And so on the masculine side, it was effectively mostly men, and there was one woman that decided she was going to go over there. And then on the feminine side, it was mostly women and two men that decided they were going to go over there. This reflects the way things are, right? If you think about like the double bell curve of how babies are born and how boys and girls come to be, most boys are bathing in a 24-hour testosterone bath, in their mommy's belly, and they're fully their masculine psyche is being developed, as they're growing inside of the womb of their mother. Same thing for women with estrogen. Their feminine psyche is being developed as they're growing in the womb of their mother. So it's just most men are very much feel comfortable operating in their masculine, and when harnessed and loved and focused and supported, they thrive. They absolutely thrive. Same thing for women. When that is harnessed and supported, they thrive as women. There's so many uh, ways that we have been cut off from this opportunity to thrive in our respective psyches, right? And that's a whole other thing. But just to finish this story, I said to each of the groups, I said, go with your group, find a quiet spot, and write down as many things that you admire, love, and cherish about the other, right? Go do that. What happened? The men were off. They were off. They were in. They zeroed in on the task. They started writing. The women, well, what do you mean by masculine? Well, I don't know. Uh, I'm not sure. Isn't masculinity bad? Isn't it like? toxic, right? All that stuff started coming up. By the time the women they hadn't even started writing, the men were done. They had 40 things that they absolutely loved about the feminine on their piece of paper, and they came back and they had all 40 things listed. It was hard, because it reflects what's happening in society right now. I actually was writing in my newsletter that Rob Henderson, someone I really admire and love, he wrote a book called Troubled this past year, and it was a wonderful autobiography. Look him up, Rob Henderson. And he had done a poll where he was asking men, hey, which would you rather have an abundance of food and have no attention from women, or have scarce food and all the attention from women? And like 79% of men said attention from women. He asked women the same question: which would you rather, have an abundance of food and no attention from men, or scarce food and all the attention from men? And about 75% of the women said food, right? So it just goes to show right there, that must be painful for men. Like, that must be painful because I feel men are so misunderstood. They're just so not seen, first of all, in just how much they love and appreciate women so deeply, right? They need women. They love and appreciate women so deeply. Everything they've done up until this point has been for women. And women have bought this lie, this narrative that their worth is determined by how successful they can be in like a status game and in a status hierarchy. Um, so they found themselves at the tops of these status hierarchies, and now they're looking around and they're alone and there's no men, and now they don't even know what masculinity is because they've been running up that masculinity, mountain. And so now they're like in it, they can't see the forest through the trees. And so it's just so unfortunate and upsetting. There's so many layers to what's happening and how we've separated from each other. And there's just a friend of mine had left me an audio message this week about just, he's just worried about financial stuff. The presidency is changing here, things are changing, things happening in the UK, Middle East, right? Just you name it, all of this stuff. And I was listening to him, and all I could think to myself was that one quote that I think I cry every time I say this quote out loud, and I've been saying it a lot this week. And so I might cry right now, but it just makes me cry. And I wonder what that is. And it goes like this: there's nothing more beautiful than an ordinary man and his ordinary wife and their ordinary kids. And I really tear up about that because, well, I guess it's because we've come so far away from the family being the core unit of our society, right? Like that's our core. And there's so many games and tricks have been devised to pit men and women against each other. And now we are having less children. And so it's like, what's the solution to all of it? And, upon hearing him talk about all the problems in the world and all these things, I just keep thinking in my mind, well, it's an ordinary man and his ordinary wife and their ordinary kids is really the only answer I can come up with. Because we can't solve mass societal problems, in like momentarily. So, but what we can do is we can help men and women, ordinary men and women, find each other, find their way back to each other. And it's just something that I care about so deeply, and it makes so much sense to me. So, that's something. What was I even saying? Masculinity and how much it matters and how without it, there is nothing, right? There is actually nothing. This might be silly. This might be only me that thinks this. I don't know. Maybe other people do too. But sometimes I drive through the streets and I think to myself, I look at the electricity poles with the electricity, and sometimes I'm in some remote place out in Texas, like I'll drive a few hours away, And I'm like, men strung these cords up here, all the way out here, and they're everywhere because they've done this so that we could have electricity, so that we could have warmth, so that we could have running water, so that we could have everything that we have. And it's just only masculinity that can do something like that, right? That can see something through to the end, that can put up a highway in a weekend, that can just make something happen because there is this one singular focus that this is going to be good for society. And it's just so it's just so unfortunate how the efforts of most men in history are just not acknowledged and seen, right? And we're focused on the 1% psychopathic narcissist person that is trying to manipulate, right? Whereas the 99% are wonderful, good men. And, I even remember this from David Buss's book, Why Men Behave Badly, evolutionary psychologist, Dr. David Buss. And there's some statistics around, the narrative around, for example, like if there were something about like a hundred rapes, right? This idea that it puts in people's minds this idea that if there were 100 rapes, then 100 men raped. And that's not even close to it. It is just a big fat lie. It is just the biggest lie, manipulation that is tool that has been used to pit people against men and masculinity in this culture. And it's heartbreaking to me because the truth of the matter is with 100 rapes, it was 1 to 2 rapists committing all of those rapes. That is the bottom 1%, right? The psychopathic percentage, the tiny little outlier. And we've created a culture that pretends like that's not true. That therein is the masculinity when you think about that's the truth. That is the data. That is the statistic. But what do we want to do? We want to paint a narrative. We want to paint a picture. Why? So many reasons why, right? To separate men and women, to, break up the family unit. There's so many reasons why. And because it's so economical, right? It's so profitable, right? For consumerism. So it kills me. There was some quote I read about like, ugh, so much that people do for some extra money, for an extra paycheck, and it's just so heartbreaking to see all that. But anyway, I digress. Masculinity. And so I just want to do a little bit of a, you know, 101, why that matters. Like when the general population thinks of masculinity, it's like handsome or muscled or driven, or nowadays, or it used to be that, right? It used to be that for the Marlboro man. Now it's like um, asshole, toxic, all of this stuff. And then I think when people think of femininity, they think of like pretty nails and pink stuff and girl stuff. And it's just, I've seen a lot of masculinity out there dressed up in really girly things. There's no femininity there, right? And interestingly enough, like I think men know this. I think on a deep level, men know this. Um, it's just women get to be taught. And I think like they've really done women a disservice and cut us off from our truth, if you think about that. Like one of my greatest joys and desires, right, is to find more love and appreciation for the women in my world, and find deeper, more intimate relationships with women that are based in truth and honesty and real connection. And it's just so hard. And you think about why is that? Why is that? Well, you think about from age 12, 13, like little girls, like there's so much shame around just womanhood in general. There's been so much shame around that. Like growing up in the West, I remember just when girls would start their bleed, right, for the first time ever, it was just a that's bad. Don't talk about that. No one has to know. Keep it to yourself. And it's just such a, oh, well, that's bad. I'm bad. I'm wrong. And then girls are constantly kind of going around trying to people please, be polite, be sweet, be nice, right? As little girls. And I think what ends up happening is they start to disassociate and disconnect from their own intuition, not to mention birth control pills, not to mention all the drugs, all that stuff. And there is this like disconnect from like ancient womanhood, which is something I believe in my soul that men deeply want back. Like good men deeply want like feeling women that are connected to their antiquity and speak truth, right? Like they're not hedging ever. They're really telling men exactly what they feel when they feel it. That's instead of manipulating, instead of playing games, right? Like that's real graceful, honorable femininity. There's so much there. And so it's so interesting how people don't understand that these terms precede us as humans. These principles live out in the world, right? Masculine, yang, right? The sun, fire, sky, right? Work, order, logic, decision, consciousness. What is tangible? Something we can really touch. These are wonderful things. Now, the feminine, yin, right? The moon, water, earth, rest, chaos as well, feeling, the unconscious, intangible things, the abstract feelings, right? The dream I had that doesn't make that much sense, but feels so real. If we over index into one, then we're off balance, right? Like we're completely off balance. And, to be very clear and upfront about what's been going on, I think, in the 20th century, we've had so many wars. We've had so much of that intense, aggressive need to be in battle that I feel that for men to participate in a war, they have to dissociate. They have to cut themselves off from what they know and what they feel. They have to. There's no other way. It's survival, and it makes so much sense. And so for so many generations, I do think men have kind of over-indexed into the masculine super far in that they haven't made space for the feminine. And I talk about this in some of my other videos. That's why so many women feel disconnected from men, right? They feel like, oh, I can't feel him. I can't touch him. I can't see him, right? And men are like, what do you mean? I'm right here. But it's all those layers. And so that's a really beautiful thing that so many men are doing such amazing work these days, unpacking that and working through that. Like Connor Beaton from Man Talks, he's leading such a huge charge. Traver Boehm from Uncivilized Man, leading such a huge charge. There's so many wonderful men doing all this amazing stuff. And on the feminine side, there's such a, you know, especially nowadays, it's so confusing thinking about the feminine actually, because in my view, almost none of us have like actually gone into the depths of the feminine where it's healthy, where we really understand it, where we live it, and we balance that with the masculine and have this like healthy balance, right? Um, Again, because the narrative for the last 50 years, 60 years has been that female worth is male success. So women have been going after what used to be male success. And so they've been abandoning femininity in general, the true feminine, feeling, unconsciousness, the things that are intangible, right? Those things have so much value. Yet in our Western society, we've never placed value on that the way that the ancients did, because the ancients knew like that is value in and of itself, right? And so it's just so important to take a moment and recognize these different principles and how they show up. I think a couple of really good examples that I always think to just to kind of help, if you think about a city, you go into a new city, the trains and the trains being on schedule, that's a masculine principle, right? We have this effectiveness happening. Whereas the murals you see and the beauty around, that's a feminine principle. Form and function, form, and function, all working together. There's a Italian designer, Alvaro, I think he was a furniture designer or an industrial designer. He has a quote that's like, "Beauty is the combination of form and function." Like you can't have just form without function. You can't have just function without form. It's ugly. Masculine and feminine principle together. Apply it to a chair, apply it to a home, apply it to anything, right? Anything that we make. And because we've severed this connection so deeply, we now have such a epidemic of carelessness in our products, right? In our consumption. Fast fashion is everything. For me, I think everything is a direct reflection of the severing of this yin yang balance, right? And how people used to be able to buy really beautiful things. They used to wear really wonderful things in the 60s, even 70s and 80s. And now, if you look around, just fits are all messed up. You can't find anything that fits you properly. This is something I'm personally very passionate about. I actually went to FIT in New York. I went into menswear design. I've always had this like deep reverence for men and just understanding men and trying to help men in some way, shape, or form. It's interesting. It's been part of my life, but I studied menswear design at FIT and I studied in Milan and Italy from the greatest like Italian tailors and designers. And there's just such magic when you can apply masculine and feminine principles together. And there is no greater like place than an ordinary man, an ordinary woman, and their ordinary children. And yeah, I think I'm going to stop this one. And I think this is kind of fun around the masculine and feminine principles. I'm going to spend some time and actually go back and get as many as examples as I can because I have so many examples, just inanimate examples about how this functions together and how important it is to understand the function so that when you apply it to relationships, right? And how we think about showing up in relationship, we can take the heat off of it, right? It's like, what's a masculine principle? What's a feminine principle? How does that really work together? So I'll leave it at that. Until the next one, y'all. If you found value in what I'm doing here, please help me grow the podcast. And you can do one of two things. Either share the episode with a friend or leave me a review on Spotify or Apple. This will help me so much. Until next time.